What's up people, we back. This one is a little chilling, let's get into it. Shout out to the sponsor, J&R Plumbing. SI mom, serving manslaughter sentence in 2001, death of daughter, 3, to be sprung from prison. Staten Island, New York, in 2001, Julie Herrnkind, along with her husband, brutally killed their 3-year-old daughter, Herrnkind, in their Stapleton home after the child had soiled herself. Now, more than 2 decades later, the mother, 45, who is serving a 25-year manslaughter sentence, stands on the cusp of gaining her freedom. Herrnkind has an open date for parole release on October 4, according to the State Department of Corrections and Community Supervision's DOC's website. That designation means Herrnkind will be paroled once required post-release arrangements or community preparation is completed. Those arrangements include securing approved housing. If Herrnkind follows through, she could be released before, on, or after her scheduled date, DOC's said. Under state law, all incarcerated individuals serving determinate sentences, except those serving life sentences, are eligible for conditional release after serving 6/7 of their maximum sentence. Herrnkind's statutory conditional release date is April 4, 2023, said DOC's. Certain inmates are also eligible to have an additional 6 months shaved off their conditional release date under DOC's Limited Time Credit Allowances Directive. To qualify, an inmate must satisfy certain criteria, to include completing one of a dozen programs. Examples entail earning a minimum of 24 college credits while participating in at least 4 semesters, obtaining a state Labor Department certification in an apprenticeship program, or completing a hospice aid training program. Inmates must also have a satisfactory disciplinary record with no serious infractions and have refrained from filing any frivolous lawsuits. SI mom serving manslaughter sentence in 2001, death of daughter, 3, to be sprung from prison. Herrnkind, seen as an infant, was just 22 pounds and 3 years old when she died on November 5, 2001 in her Stapleton home. Herrnkind qualified, and her conditional release date was advanced to October 4, DOC's said. Once free, Herrnkind must abide by a number of conditions. They include fully complying with her parole officer's instructions, permitting searches of her person, home and property by her parole officer, and leading a law-abiding life. Herrnkind, who is currently incarcerated in Albion Correctional Facility upstate, will be monitored by the Parole Department until October 2, 2026, said a DOC's spokesman. The AdvanceCLive.com has submitted a Freedom of Information Law request to determine if the State Parole Board has set any additional post-release conditions for Herrnkind. Attorney Matthew Zuntag, who represented Herrnkind at her 2004 murder trial, declined comment for this story. Herrnkind's release would close the final chapter in one of the most disturbing incidents to have occurred in the borough in the past quarter-century. Herrnkind was just 22 pounds when she died at the hands of her parents on November 5, 2001. Prosecutors said Julie Herrnkind and her then-spouse, Matthew Popp, tortured the little girl in their Boyd Street home because she had soiled herself. The couple rubbed the child's body with a scouring pad and force-fed her soap, said officials. They then held her head under running water for 4 or 5 minutes and left her lying in a bathtub for a few hours, officials said. The little girl died of asphyxia when her tongue was forced back over her airwaves by the water poured into her mouth and nose, the city medical examiner said. Silena also suffered from battered child syndrome, said the medical examiner. Matthew Popp, then known as Matthew Herrnkind, is seen leaving State Supreme Court, St. George, after a court appearance in November 2001. Popp, who was serving a sentence of 15 years to life in connection with the death of his daughter, Herrnkind, was released on parole on May 31, 2022. Autopsy reports showed the tot had at least 74 bruises on her body, although those injuries, some of which were weeks old, did not kill her, a medical examiner testified at Julie Herrnkind's murder trial. When questioned by authorities after Silena's death, both Herrnkind and Popp had pointed the finger at each other. Herrnkind was 24, then. Her husband was 27. Julie Herrnkind was more than 7 months pregnant with her sixth child when her daughter was killed. She was acquitted at trial in State Supreme Court, St. George, of second-degree murder but convicted of first-degree manslaughter. Pop resolved his case in September 2003 by pleading guilty in State Supreme Court, St. George, to second-degree murder. In exchange, he was sentenced to 15 years to life in prison. Pop accepted responsibility at his sentencing but also accused his wife of engineering the fatal events. He said she had used him and previously said he acted at her direction and insistence the day Selena died. But he made no admission of guilt regarding any beatings his daughter might have sustained, the AdvanceCliv.com reported then. At the time of his daughter's death, Pop was known as Matthew Herrnkind after taking his wife's surname. Julie Herrnkind testified her husband had abused her and their children. At her sentencing, she maintained her spouse, alone, tortured their daughter. The couple divorced over a decade ago. Father released Pop, now 48, was freed on May 31 after serving more than 20 years. He was released after his sixth appearance before the parole board. His prior requests for parole were denied. Pop told the board he is no longer the same young man who submissively bent to the will of his domineering wife and bottled up his emotions. In its decision to release Pop, the panel cited his expression of humility and remorse for his crimes and his maturation while behind bars. As evidence of his rehabilitation, the former Stapleton resident had a good disciplinary record and completed all his mandated programs while incarcerated, earned a bachelor's degree in psychology, and served as an instructor for other inmates, noted the board. But at the same time, the board also stressed it does not condone and cannot excuse those disturbing acts for which Pop spent more than 20 years in prison. Your release should in no way be interpreted as mitigating or discounting the seriousness of your actions and the significant injuries you and your wife caused your victim, your 3-year-old daughter who died as the result of your neglect and abuse, wrote the board after Pop's hearing on April 20. There is no explanation that can ever justify your behavior, and no amount of time you can serve that will atone for this crime, the panel said. You will forever remain guilty of depraved indifference for the murder of a helpless child. Afterward, Mark J. Font, Pop's lawyer, said the decision to set his client free was long overdue. Despite the sensational headlines, he only pled guilty to failing to protect his daughter from her abusive and sick mother, said Font. Matthew is a warm and loving individual. He grieves for his daughter.